Batman, Arkham Asylum, the complete lore. On an island far removed from the glittering towers and neon-lit streets of Gotham City, there stands a monument to humanity's darkest failures. Arkham Asylum, a gothic fortress of stone and iron, wrapped in fog and shadow, where the most dangerous minds in the world are kept behind reinforced walls and electrified gates. But Arkham is more than a prison. It is a tomb for broken souls, a cathedral of insanity. And on one long, terrible night, it would become something far worse. This is the story of that night. The night when the inmates seized control. The night when Batman walked willingly into hell. The night that would reveal the asylum's oldest, most terrible secrets. Secrets carved into its very foundations by a man whose name has long since been swallowed by madness. To understand what happened when the Joker orchestrated his masterpiece of chaos, we must first journey backward through time into the shadows of Arkham's twisted history. We must descend into the mind of its founder, a man who believed he could cure Gotham's sickness, but instead became its most tragic victim. The house that madness built. Long before Batman ever walked its halls, before the Joker's laughter echoed through its corridors, Arkham Asylum was nothing more than a dream in the mind of one man. His name was Amadeus Arkham, and his story is a testament to how quickly the line between healer and patient can blur, how the very act of staring into the abyss transforms those who dare to look. Amadeus Arkham was born into privilege, but that privilege came with a curse. His mother, Elizabeth Arkham, suffered from severe mental illness, delusions, paranoia, visions of supernatural torment. Young Amadeus watched helplessly as the woman who gave him life slowly lost her grip on reality. Night after night, hearing her screams about a demonic bat that tormented her dreams. The experience scarred him, but it also gave him purpose. He would dedicate his life to understanding the human mind, to healing those afflicted with the diseases that had destroyed his mother. He studied psychiatry at the finest institutions. He earned residencies at Metropolis State Psychiatric Hospital, learning from the greatest minds in the field. He developed revolutionary theories about treatment and rehabilitation. Amadeus Arkham was going to change the world. But some wounds never heal. Some memories never fade. When Amadeus returned home after years of study, he found his mother's condition had deteriorated beyond recognition. Elizabeth Arkham no longer recognized her own son. She raved about creatures in the shadows, about demons wearing the faces of loved ones, about a great winged beast that would consume Gotham. The doctors told Amadeus there was no hope, no cure, no mercy left for Elizabeth Arkham except the mercy of death. And so in what he convinced himself was an act of compassion, Amadeus murdered his mother. He slit her throat in the dead of night, telling himself it was euthanasia, a release from suffering. He made it look like suicide. He buried the truth deep in his mind, locked it away where he thought it would never resurface. He inherited the Arkham family mansion, a sprawling Gothic estate on a remote island several miles from Gotham's shores. The mansion had history, dark history. It had once belonged to an occultist named Jason Blood,
who had performed exorcisms within its walls and trapped lost souls in the basement using blood magic. Some said the mansion was cursed. Some said the ground itself was tainted by centuries of suffering.
Amadeus Arkham saw an opportunity.
He would tear down the family home and build something new in its place. Something that would honor his mother's memory while serving the city of Gotham. He would create the Elizabeth Arkham Asylum for the criminally insane, a facility where Gotham's most troubled minds could be treated with compassion and cutting-edge psychiatric care. The city embraced his vision. Judge Solomon Wayne, a prominent figure in Gotham society, an ancestor of Bruce Wayne, threw his considerable influence behind the project. The architect Cyrus Pinckney, renowned for his Gothic revival style, was commissioned to design the facility. Pinckney had been impressed by young Amadeus since his student days and believed deeply in his mission to rehabilitate criminals. Construction began. The old Arkham mansion was torn down, but its foundations remained. Those cursed stones where Jason Blood had performed his dark rituals, where Elizabeth Arkham had screamed about demons in the night. The new asylum would be built on top of that tainted ground, incorporating the old cellars and catacombs into its design. Amadeus Arkham supervised every detail. He designed treatment rooms, isolation cells, therapeutic gardens. He constructed the Devil's Slide, a staircase leading down into the asylum's underbelly, a section he called the Gallows, where he could monitor the most dangerous patients away from general population. He told the architects it was for observation purposes, for studying patients in controlled environments. He lied. The gallows were designed for torture, for experimentation, for the things Amadeus Arkham would do when he finally allowed the darkness within himself to emerge. But that transformation hadn't yet occurred. In those early days, Amadeus genuinely believed he was doing good. He threw himself into his work with almost religious fervor. His reputation spread throughout Gotham and beyond. Here was a man who would treat the criminally insane not as monsters to be locked away, but as patients who deserved compassion and a chance at redemption. The Elizabeth Arkham Asylum for the criminally insane opened its doors to its first patient in the year of our Lord, a man who would forever change Amadeus Arkham's destiny. His name was Martin Mad Dog Hawkins. The breaking point. Mad Dog. Hawkins was a serial killer, a predator who had terrorized Gotham for months before the police finally tracked him down. His crimes were unspeakable, acts of violence so brutal that even hardened detectives couldn't speak of them without their voices trembling. But Mad Dog Hawkins had been declared criminally insane, unfit to stand trial, and so he was delivered to Arkham Asylum for treatment. Amadeus Arkham accepted him personally. He saw Hawkins as a test case, an opportunity to prove that even the most twisted minds could be brought back from the abyss. He would study Hawkins, understand what made him kill, and find a way to cure him. It would be Amadeus's greatest triumph, the validation of everything he believed about psychiatric treatment. What Amadeus didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Mad Dog Hawkins had already marked him as a victim. Hawkins escaped from Arkham during a moment of lapsed security. The asylum was still new, its procedures untested, its guards inexperienced. Hawkins slipped through a gap in the system and vanished into the night. He made his way to Amadeus Arkham's temporary residence in Gotham City proper, where Amadeus lived with his wife Constance and their young daughter Harriet, while the asylum was being perfected. Hawkins broke in while Amadeus was working late at the asylum, finalizing treatment plans, dreaming of the cures he would discover. When Amadeus returned home, he found them. His wife, his daughter, dead. The details of what Mad Dog Hawkins did to Constance and Harriet Arkham were too horrific to record in any official document. What matters is that when Amadeus found their bodies, something inside him shattered beyond repair. The man who had dedicated his life to understanding the criminal mind, who had believed in redemption and rehabilitation, who had killed his own mother out of what he told himself was mercy. That man died in the moment he walked through his door and saw what Hawkins had done. The creature that replaced him wore Amadeus Arkham's face, but it was no longer human. Mad Dog Hawkins was recaptured within days. The police found him covered in the blood of the Arkham family, making no attempt to hide or flee. He was returned to Arkham Asylum, placed in Amadeus's care once again. Gotham society praised Amadeus for his compassion, his willingness to treat the man who had destroyed his family. They called him a saint, a martyr to the cause of psychiatric reform. They had no idea what was happening in the depths of Arkham Asylum. Amadeus Arkham administered treatment to Martin Hawkins for months. Electroshock therapy, primarily. Session after session, week after week, Amadeus would strap Hawkins into the chair and flood his brain with electricity. He told the other staff members he was attempting to restructure Hawkins's neural pathways, to literally shock the madness out of him. He was lying. He was killing Mad Dog Hawkins, slowly torturing him with electricity, watching him writhe and scream and beg for mercy. Amadeus would lean in close during these sessions and whisper to Hawkins about Constance and Harriet, describing in detail what he imagined happened to them, making Hawkins relive his crimes while thousands of volts coursed through his body. And then, one night, Amadeus turned the voltage up too high. Mad Dog Hawkins convulsed in the chair, his eyes rolling back in his skull, foam bubbling from his mouth. His heart stopped. He died strapped to Amadeus Arkham's electroshock therapy chair, executed under the guise of treatment. Amadeus told the staff it was an accident, an unfortunate complication of the therapy. They believed him. He was the renowned Dr. Amadeus Arkham, after all, who would question his methods. But Amadeus knew what he had done, and in knowing, he felt the last threads of his sanity begin to unravel. The Descent. The murder of Mad Dog Hawkins should have been cathartic for Amadeus Arkham. Revenge should have brought him peace. Instead, it opened a door in his mind that could never be closed. He began seeing things, hearing things. The same supernatural bat that his mother had raved about in her final days before he killed her. Amadeus saw it too. It would appear in shadows, in corners, in the moments between sleep and waking. A massive demonic creature with wings that blocked out the light and eyes that saw straight through into the darkest parts of his soul. Amadeus became obsessed with the bat. He convinced himself that it was a real entity, a demon that had attached itself to the Arkham bloodline generations ago. His mother hadn't been insane, she had been cursed. And now that curse had passed to him. He began researching occult texts, studying binding spells and exorcism rituals. He redesigned sections of the asylum according to mystical principles, incorporating ancient symbols into the architecture. The floor plans began to follow patterns that had nothing to do with psychiatric treatment and everything to do with creating mystical containment circles. At night, alone in his office, Amadeus would don his dead mother's wedding dress, a grotesque parody of mourning and madness. He would take up her razor, the blade she had supposedly used to kill herself, though it had actually been his blade, his hand that ended her life. And he would cut symbols into his own flesh, marking himself with sigils meant to ward off the demonic bat.
The other staff members at Arkham began to notice changes in their founder. Dr. Amadeus Arkham was becoming erratic, paranoid, violent. He would fly into rages over minor infractions. He began conducting experiments on patients that had nothing to do with psychiatric care. Experiments involving sensory deprivation, chemical cocktails, and procedures that would have been at home in medieval torture chambers. The gallows, that section beneath the asylum that Amadeus had designed for observation, revealed its true purpose. Amadeus would take patients down there, the ones no one would miss, the ones whose families had abandoned them, the ones Gotham had forgotten. He would chain them in cells he had carved into the bedrock, cells that followed those mystical patterns he had drawn from occult texts. He told himself he was trying to bind the demon, that by performing these rituals, by carving these symbols, by making these sacrifices, he could trap the bat entity forever and save future generations of the Arkham family from its curse. He was lying to himself. He had simply become what he once tried to cure. A mind so broken by trauma that madness was the only refuge left. Eventually, even Gotham's tolerance for Amadeus Arkham's eccentricities ran out. The stories coming out of the asylum became too dark to ignore. Families of patients began asking questions. Inspectors showed up unannounced. The truth about what was happening in Arkham's depths could no longer be hidden. Amadeus Arkham was declared criminally insane and committed to his own institution. He was placed in a cell in the most secure wing of the asylum, a cell he had designed himself years earlier when he still believed he was building a place of healing. He spent his final years in that cell, scratching symbols into the walls with his fingernails. Hour after hour, day after day, he carved mystical sigils and binding spells into every surface, covering the walls from floor to ceiling with incomprehensible script. He was trying to trap the bat demon, he said, trying to protect the world from the curse that had destroyed his family. When guards checked on him, Amadeus would rave about how the bat was coming, how it would consume Gotham, how only he could stop it. He would beg them to let him finish his binding spell, to give him more time, just a little more time. Amadeus Arkham died in that cell, his fingers worn down to bloody stumps
from years of scratching at stone. His final words, according to the guard on duty that night, were, "The bat is here." He was buried in a small cemetery on Arkham Island, a lonely grave marker bearing his name and the dates of his birth and death. The asylum he founded continued to operate, passing through the hands of various administrators over the decades. The story of Amadeus Arkham became legend, then rumor, then forgotten entirely by all but a few historians. But some legends have a way of returning. Some curses never truly end. And the words Amadeus Arkham carved into his cell walls remained, waiting to be read by someone who would understand their true meaning. Chapter 2: The Asylum's Long Darkness. Decades of dysfunction. The years following Amadeus Arkham's death saw the asylum transform from an idealistic vision of rehabilitation into something far darker, a revolving door for Gotham's worst criminals, a place where the line between treatment and containment blurred beyond recognition. New administrators came and went, each promising reform, each failing to address the fundamental rot at Arkham's core. The facility's reputation grew more sinister with each passing decade. Stories spread through Gotham about what happened behind Arkham's walls. Stories of experimental treatments, of patients driven further into madness rather than cured, of staff members who enjoyed their power over the helpless inmates a little too much. As Gotham itself evolved, as the city gave birth to a new breed of criminal, the so-called supervillains who defied conventional categorization, Arkham Asylum became their primary destination. These weren't ordinary criminals, they were theatrical, larger-than-life figures driven by compulsions and obsessions that ordinary prisons couldn't contain. They needed specialized facilities, specialized care, or so the courts claimed. In truth, Arkham Asylum had become a dumping ground. When Gotham's legal system didn't know what to do with someone, when a criminal was too dangerous for Blackgate Prison or too mentally unstable for conventional incarceration, they ended up at Arkham. The asylum's stated purpose of rehabilitation gave the courts a convenient excuse to avoid the moral complications of execution or life imprisonment. If the criminal was insane, they could be treated indefinitely at Arkham. The facility expanded to accommodate its growing population. New wings were added to the original Gothic structure, modern additions that clashed aesthetically with Amadeus Arkham's Victorian architecture, but served the practical purpose of housing more inmates. The old sections of the asylum, including the mansion-turned-administration building and the catacombs beneath, remained largely unchanged monuments to a bygone era. By the early 21st century, Arkham Asylum had become infamous, not just in Gotham, but internationally. Psychiatric professionals studied it as an example of institutional failure. Criminal justice reformers pointed to it as evidence of society's inability to properly care for the mentally ill. Human rights organizations investigated it for abuses. And all the while, the inmates kept coming. The age of Batman. Everything changed when Batman appeared in Gotham. At first, his impact on Arkham Asylum was indirect. Batman's war on crime created a new category of criminal.
Adversaries who rose to challenge him, who saw the Dark Knight as the ultimate opponent, who transformed themselves into theatrical personas to match his own dramatic presentation. The Joker, the Riddler, Two-Face, Poison Ivy, Scarecrow, Killer Croc. An entire rogues gallery of psychologically complex, obsessively driven criminals, each one more dangerous than the last. And when Batman caught them, and he always caught them, they were declared criminally insane and sent to Arkham Asylum. The facility was never designed for this. Amadeus Arkham had envisioned treating ordinary citizens driven to madness by trauma or mental illness. He never imagined his asylum would house individuals like the Joker, whose sanity was so far removed from any clinical definition that psychiatrists couldn't even agree on what was wrong with him. He never imagined treating someone like Poison Ivy, whose connection to plant life had transformed her into something not quite human. He never imagined containing someone like Killer Croc, whose genetic mutation made him more monster than man. Arkham's staff struggled to adapt. New security measures were implemented: reinforced cells, electronic monitoring systems, specialized containment units designed for specific inmates. Wayne Enterprises, the company owned by billionaire Bruce Wayne, donated substantial funds and cutting-edge technology to upgrade the asylum's infrastructure. Ostensibly, this was philanthropy. In reality, Batman needed Arkham to actually hold the criminals he captured, but no amount of technological upgrades could address the fundamental problem. Arkham Asylum had never successfully rehabilitated anyone. The same inmates rotated through its doors again and again. They would be captured, committed, declared improved, released or escape, commit new crimes, and return. The cycle was endless. Staff turnover was astronomical. Guards quit after experiencing the psychological toll of working in such an environment. Psychiatrists left after realizing their treatments weren't working, that they were simply managing madness rather than curing it. Those who stayed too long often began showing signs of mental instability themselves. One member of Arkham's staff would prove to be a particularly tragic example of the asylum's corrupting influence. The birth of Harley Quinn. Dr. Harleen Quinzel arrived at Arkham Asylum as a brilliant young psychiatrist, eager to make her mark on the field. She had graduated top of her class, written groundbreaking papers on criminal psychology, and specifically requested assignment to Arkham because she wanted to work with Gotham's most fascinating cases. She wanted specifically to work with the Joker. The Clown Prince of Crime had become something of a celebrity among psychiatric professionals. His complete immunity to traditional treatment, his apparent lack of any coherent motivation beyond chaos itself, his ability to manipulate everyone around him. All of this made him the ultimate challenge for a psychiatrist. Harleen Quinzel believed she could succeed where others had failed. She believed she could crack the code of the Joker's mind. She was assigned to his case. They began regular therapy sessions, the young psychiatrist and the criminal mastermind, separated by glass in a maximum security interview room. The Joker was charming. That was the thing people always forgot about him. Beneath the makeup and the madness, he could be incredibly charismatic when he wanted to be. He told Harleen stories about his past, tragic tales of abuse and abandonment that made her heart ache with sympathy. He made her laugh with clever jokes and observations about the absurdity of life. He made her feel special, like she was the only person who truly understood him. He was playing her. Every word, every gesture,
Every carefully crafted story was part of an elaborate manipulation. The Joker didn't want to be cured. He wanted to create a partner in crime, someone who would be completely devoted to him, someone he could mold into his perfect companion. The sessions continued for months. Harleen Quinzel found herself thinking about the Joker constantly, analyzing his words, dreaming up new treatment approaches. She was falling in love with her patient, though she couldn't yet admit it to herself. Then came the night of the Joker's escape attempt, a seemingly spontaneous breakout that resulted in the Joker being beaten severely by guards before being subdued. Harleen found him bloodied and broken in his cell, claiming the guards had tortured him for sport. It was the final piece of manipulation he needed after Harleen Quinzel helped the Joker escape from Arkham Asylum. She abandoned her career, her reputation, everything she had worked for. She donned a Harlequin costume, dyed her hair, and became Harley Quinn, the Joker's girlfriend, accomplice, and arguably greatest victim. Her descent into madness was gradual but inevitable. The longer she spent with the Joker, the more she lost herself in his worldview. His abuse was constant. Physical, emotional, psychological. He would beat her, mock her, abandon her, only to draw her back in with occasional moments of affection. It was textbook trauma bonding, the same pattern seen in domestic abuse cases, but magnified to a theatrical extreme. Harley Quinn became one of Gotham's most dangerous criminals in her own right. Not because she was inherently evil, but because her love for the Joker made her capable of absolutely anything. She would kill for him. She would die for him. And most tragically, she would help him hurt countless others, all while believing he truly cared about her. The staff at Arkham Asylum watched one of their own brightest doctors transform into a criminal. It should have been a wake-up call about the dangers of working too closely with such disturbed minds. Instead, it became just another dark story in Arkham's long history of failure. Enter Quincy Sharp. By the time Batman had been operating in Gotham for nearly a decade, Arkham Asylum was in desperate need of competent leadership. The position of warden had become a revolving door, with administrators lasting a year or two at most, before the stress drove them to resign or suffer complete breakdowns. The job eventually fell to a man named Quincy Sharp. On paper, Quincy Sharp appeared to be exactly what Arkham needed. He was a psychiatric professional with years of experience in both public and private sectors. He was politically connected, skilled at navigating Gotham's bureaucracy and securing funding for the asylum. He was charismatic, able to present well in public and reassure Gotham's citizens that their most dangerous criminals were being properly managed. He was also severely mentally ill, though he had successfully hidden his condition from every psychiatric evaluation. Quincy Sharp had been diagnosed with schizophrenic personality disorder years earlier, a diagnosis he had buried, ignored, and convinced himself was a mistake. How could someone of his importance, someone destined for greatness, be mentally ill like the criminals he oversaw? It was impossible. The doctors who had evaluated him must have been wrong, but the delusions remained, growing worse as Sharp aged. He began experiencing episodes where he would lose time, finding himself in places with no memory of how he got there. He heard voices, though he convinced himself they were simply his own thoughts, speaking to him with unusual clarity. He saw patterns and connections that others couldn't perceive, which he interpreted as evidence of his superior intellect rather than symptoms of illness. When Quincy Sharp became warden of Arkham Asylum, he had access to parts of the facility that most staff never saw. He explored the old sections, the abandoned wings, the cellars and catacombs that dated back to Amadeus Arkham's time. And there, hidden in forgotten corners of the asylum, he found them. The journals, the carved symbols, the writings of Amadeus Arkham. Sharp became obsessed with these documents. He would spend hours reading the mad scrawlings of the asylum's founder, trying to make sense of the mystical gibberish and occult symbolism. And slowly, perhaps inevitably, given his own mental illness, Quincy Sharp began to believe that Amadeus Arkham's spirit was speaking to him. Not metaphorically, literally speaking to him, guiding him, passing on the torch of Arkham's original vision. A second personality emerged within Quincy Sharp's mind, an identity that called itself the Spirit of Arkham. When the spirit took control, Sharp would write his own journal entries in the style of Amadeus Arkham, documenting his experiences and philosophies. He would create stone tablets called the Chronicles of Arkham and hide them throughout the asylum, containing recordings of both Amadeus's original writings and his own contemporary additions. The Spirit of Arkham believed it had a divine mission: to cleanse Gotham of its criminal element, to complete the work Amadeus had started. But where Amadeus had believed in rehabilitation, at least initially, the Spirit of Arkham believed in elimination. The inmates of Arkham were not patients to be treated, but plagues to be eradicated. While in the grip of his alternate personality, Quincy Sharp stalked inmates through the asylum's corridors. He killed several, though his rational personality never remembered these murders. He made detailed plans to kill more, burning Poison Ivy alive, lobotomizing Harley Quinn, and ultimately executing the Joker himself. He attempted to carry out that final assassination one night, sneaking into the maximum security wing where the Joker was held, carrying a knife. But the Joker was always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. He had already deduced that Sharp was mentally ill, had already figured out the warden's schedule and patterns. When Sharp arrived to kill him, the Joker was waiting. What followed was a brief but vicious fight that ended with the Joker subduing Sharp and discovering the full extent of his insanity. The Joker was delighted. Here was Arkham Asylum's warden, the man supposed to keep all these dangerous criminals contained, and he was just as insane as any of them. It was perfect. It was beautiful. The Joker could have exposed Sharp's madness. He could have destroyed the warden's career and credibility with a single testimony. Instead, he kept the secret. He saw potential in Quincy Sharp, saw ways the warden's delusions could be useful in the future. The Joker filed away that information for later use and sent Quincy Sharp back to his office with his secret intact. Sharp, meanwhile, had no memory of the incident once his rational personality reasserted control. But the spirit of Arkham remained, lurking in his psyche, waiting for the right moment to emerge again. And the writings of Amadeus Arkham continued to call to him, promising him a destiny greater than mere administration of an asylum. The The stage was set. All the pieces were in place. Arkham Asylum had become a powder keg, waiting for someone to light the fuse. That someone was, predictably, the Joker.
Chapter 3: The Longest Night.
A trap disguised as victory. The Joker's plan was elegant in its simplicity. He would commit a crime so public, so undeniable, that Batman would have no choice but to personally escort him back to Arkham Asylum. Once inside the facility, the Joker would spring his trap. A carefully orchestrated takeover that would transform the entire island into his personal playground.
Months of preparation went into this scheme. The Joker had been planting seeds since his last incarceration at Arkham, cultivating relationships with staff members, identifying weaknesses in security protocols, smuggling resources into the facility. He'd even arranged for a convenient fire at Blackgate Prison that would necessitate transferring dozens of his thugs to Arkham's overcrowded cell blocks, giving him an instant army once the chaos began. And through it all, he had Harley Quinn on the outside, orchestrating the logistics he couldn't handle from his cell. The inciting incident came on a summer evening in Gotham. The Joker and his gang raided City Hall, taking Mayor Quincy Sharp hostage. Yes, the same Quincy Sharp who was Arkham's warden. Sharp had parlayed his position at the asylum into a successful political career, though his mental illness remained undetected. The Joker tied Sharp to a bomb, made grandiose threats, and waited for the inevitable arrival of Batman. The confrontation was theatrical but brief. Batman appeared, disabled the bomb, fought through the Joker's henchmen, and captured the clown prince of crime. To the GCPD officers on scene, it looked like a routine victory. Batman apprehending the Joker once again, the system working as intended. Only Commissioner James Gordon seemed uneasy about how easily the Joker had been captured, but Batman assured him that the Joker was going back to Arkham Asylum where he belonged, and Gordon trusted Batman's judgment. Batman loaded the Joker into the Batmobile and drove through Gotham's streets toward the causeway leading to Arkham Island. The Joker, handcuffed in the passenger seat, was in remarkably good spirits. He hummed little tunes. He made jokes about Batman's driving. He seemed almost happy.
"You know something, Bats?" the Joker said as the Batmobile approached the island. "I'm glad to be going home. Arkham's where I belong, where we belong." Batman said nothing. He was already scanning the asylum's perimeter with the Batmobile's sensors, looking for anything unusual. But the facility appeared secure. Guards were stationed at their posts. The walls were intact. Nothing seemed amiss. The Batmobile passed through the security checkpoint at Arkham's front gates. Batman drove directly to the intensive treatment center, the facility's maximum security wing where the most dangerous inmates were housed. He escorted the Joker personally, refusing to hand him off to guards until he was certain the clown prince of crime was properly secured. Commissioner Gordon met them at intensive treatment. He wanted to be there personally to ensure the Joker was properly processed and contained. But even Gordon seemed to sense something was off. The guards were too casual, too relaxed for men about to take custody of Gotham's most dangerous criminal. And the Joker's good mood only intensified as they wheeled him through the facility on a prisoner transport trolley. As they passed various departments, the Joker called out to staff members by name, made crude jokes about the asylum's new security measures. mentioned how convenient it was that a recent fire at Blackgate had resulted in so many of his former associates being transferred to Arkham. It was as if he was conducting a tour rather than being processed as an inmate. They passed Warden Quincy Sharp, who watched the procession with an unreadable expression. They passed Dr. Penelope Young, a psychiatrist who had been conducting research on something called the Titan formula. They passed Aaron Cash, a senior guard who was one of the few truly dedicated professionals left working at Arkham. And they passed Frank Bowles, another guard whose too wide smile suggested he had been bought and paid for long before tonight. Batman's instincts were screaming at him that something was wrong, but he couldn't identify the specific threat. Everything appeared procedurally correct. The Joker was being transported according to standard protocols. There was no overt sign of danger. "Always a pleasure to come back to Arkham," the Joker said cheerfully as they wheeled him toward his cell. "It's like coming home for the holidays. Speaking of which, have you put up the decorations yet? I left some suggestions in my cell from last time." They reached the security door that would take the Joker to his holding cell. Batman stopped the trolley, ready to personally ensure the Joker was locked away. But before he could proceed, Warden Sharp appeared and placed a hand on Batman's armored shoulder. "We can take it from here, Batman," Sharp said. His voice had an odd quality to it, as if he was reading from a script. "The Joker's back where he belongs. We'll make sure he doesn't cause any more trouble tonight." Batman hesitated. Every instinct told him to stay, to personally oversee the Joker's incarceration. But he had no legal authority within Arkham Asylum. The facility was under Sharp's jurisdiction, not his, and Gordon was giving him a look that said they needed to leave to let the asylum staff do their jobs. "Don't worry about me, Bats," the Joker called out as guards wheeled him away. "I'll be fine. We'll see each other real soon." The way he said "real soon" made Batman's blood run cold. Batman and Commissioner Gordon left intensive treatment and headed toward the front gates. They were nearly at the entrance when the first alarm sounded. Then all hell broke loose. The takeover. The Joker's escape was anticlimactic in its execution. The moment Batman and Gordon were clear of intensive treatment, Frank Bowles, the guard who had been grinning too widely all evening, simply released the Joker from his restraints and unlocked his cell door. Harley Quinn emerged from where she'd been hiding in the asylum's security office, having infiltrated earlier disguised as a maintenance worker. She gleefully accessed Arkham's mainframe and opened every cell door in the facility simultaneously. Hundreds of inmates, many of them the Joker's own thugs, transferred from Blackgate, poured into the corridors. The Joker had contingencies in place for every predictable response. Guards who tried to contain the breakout found themselves facing overwhelming numbers. Staff members who attempted to call for outside help discovered that all communications were being jammed by equipment Harley had installed weeks earlier. Psychiatrists and medical personnel who tried to retreat to safe rooms found those rooms had been sabotaged, their locks disabled, their panic buttons disconnected. Within minutes, the inmates had seized control of Arkham Asylum's major buildings. The Joker's forces held intensive treatment, the medical facility, the penitentiary, and the botanical gardens. Only the administration building, the old Arkham Manor, remained partially secure, though guards were quickly being overwhelmed there as well. Batman heard the alarms and saw the chaos erupting. He immediately turned back, racing toward intensive treatment while Gordon called for GCPD backup. But the Joker had planned for this, too. As Batman approached the facility, explosives detonated along the causeway connecting Arkham Island to the mainland. The bridges collapsed into the water, cutting off access for GCPD reinforcements.
Sorry, Bats.
The Joker's voice echoed across the island through the PA system, which Harley had also compromised. No party crashers tonight. This is a private event, very exclusive guest list. And guess what? You're the guest of honor. Batman found himself trapped on Arkham Island with hundreds of freed inmates, no backup and no way to call for help. Exactly as the Joker had planned, Gordon and what few loyal guards remained in intensive treatment managed to establish a defensive position, barricading themselves in a secure area. Batman joined them, quickly assessing the situation. It was catastrophic. The Joker had complete control of the asylum's infrastructure, security systems, power grid, communications, everything.
Batman, we're cut off, Gordon said grimly, his police radio spitting nothing but static. No way to call for backup, no way off the island until the GCPD can organize boats. We're on our own.
Batman looked out at the chaos through the barricaded windows. Inmates were running wild through the grounds, attacking guards, destroying property, engaging in violence for the sheer joy of it. And somewhere out there, the Joker was orchestrating all of it, conducting his symphony of madness.
He wanted me here, Batman said quietly. This whole thing was designed to trap me in Arkham. The question is why? As if in answer, the Joker's voice crackled over the PA again. Welcome home, Batman. To Arkham Asylum. Tonight we're going to play a little game. I call it Survival of the Fittest. You see, I've invited some of your old friends to join our party. Scarecrow, Killer Croc, Poison Ivy, they're all dying to see you again. And I've got something really special planned for the grand finale, something that's going to change the face of Gotham forever. The Joker's laughter echoed across the island, a sound that would haunt Batman's nightmares for years to come. By the way, the Joker added, his voice taking on a more sinister tone, I've hidden bombs all over Gotham City. Little presents I planted before you so rudely interrupted my fun at City Hall. If I don't send a signal at regular intervals, those bombs go boom. So you can't just wait for the GCPD to rescue you. You need to play my game, Bats. You need to survive the night. And you need to do it while keeping me alive. Because if I die, if my heart stops, if I fail to send those signals, well, let's just say Gotham's going to have a very bad morning. Batman's jaw clenched. The Joker had trapped him perfectly. He couldn't kill the Joker without condemning Gotham. He couldn't escape the island. And he couldn't just wait for reinforcements. He had to play the Joker's game. What do you want? Batman called out to the PA system. What do I want? Oh, Bats, I want what I've always wanted. I want to see what you're really made of. I want to test you, push you, break you down to your fundamental components and see if there's anything left. Tonight, Arkham Asylum becomes our arena. Tonight, we find out who you really are underneath that mask. Tonight, one way or another, we're going to have so much fun. The PA system went silent. Batman stood in the barricaded room, surrounded by terrified guards and an increasingly worried Commissioner Gordon. Outside, Arkham Island had transformed into a war zone. What are you going to do? Gordon asked.
Batman looked at the commissioner, then out at the chaos beyond the windows. There was only one answer to that question. Only one thing he could do. I'm going to stop him. The games begin. Batman's first objective was to secure critical areas and rescue surviving staff members scattered throughout the asylum. He left Gordon and the guards defending intensive treatment and ventured out into Arkham's possessed grounds alone. The contrast between the asylum he had seen hundreds of times before and what it had become was stark. Where there had once been at least a veneer of order, now there was only chaos. Inmates roamed freely, some engaging in violence, others simply reveling in their newfound freedom. The Joker's thugs had established territorial control over various sections, setting up makeshift command posts and patrol routes. But even more disturbing were the modifications the Joker had made to the environment. Arkham Asylum had been transformed into a twisted funhouse, a monument to the Joker's deranged sense of humor. Mannequins posed in grotesque tableaus lined the walkways. Graffiti covered every wall. Crude jokes and taunting messages spray-painted across the Gothic architecture. The Joker's signature grin had been replicated everywhere, a constant reminder of who was in control. Batman moved through the shadows, using stealth and fear to his advantage. The thugs might have numbers, but he had training, technology, and the psychological edge. He was Batman. In the darkness, he was the thing these men feared more than the Joker. One by one, Batman picked off isolated thugs, leaving them unconscious and dangling from gargoyles as warnings to their compatriots. He listened to their conversations, gathering intelligence about the Joker's plans. And what he heard was deeply troubling. The thugs kept mentioning something called Titan, some kind of chemical formula that would make them unstoppable, they said. The Joker was going to use it to create an army of superhumans who would take over Gotham. Batman realized this was the Joker's endgame, not just escaping Arkham or killing Batman, but transforming himself and his followers into something more powerful. Batman made his way to the medical facility, hoping to find Dr. Penelope Young, the psychiatrist whose research notes he had seen mentioned in confiscated files. If anyone knew what Titan was, it would be her. What he found in the medical facility was a scene of absolute horror. Scarecrow had been here. Dr. Jonathan Crane, the Scarecrow, had been one of Arkham's most dangerous inmates even before tonight. A psychologist turned supervillain, Crane had developed a fear toxin that induced vivid hallucinations of a person's worst nightmares. Batman had encountered Scarecrow's gas before and built up a partial immunity, but the effect was still powerful. The medical facility reeked of fear gas. Bodies of staff members and patients lay collapsed on the floor, their faces frozen in expressions of absolute terror. Some had died of heart attacks brought on by the sheer panic induced by Scarecrow's toxin. Others had injuries sustained while trying to flee from hallucinated threats. And Scarecrow himself was still here, lurking somewhere in the facility, waiting for Batman. "Welcome, Batman," Scarecrow's voice whispered from hidden speakers. "I've been waiting for you. Tonight, we're going to explore the nature of fear together, your fear. Because I've learned something fascinating about you over the years. You're afraid of failing, afraid of not being able to save everyone,
afraid that one day your crusade will have been for nothing.
The lights in the medical facility flickered and died, plunging Batman into darkness. He activated his cowl's night vision just as fear gas began pumping into the room through the ventilation system. Batman held his breath and sealed his cowl, but he had already inhaled some of the toxin. The hallucinations began almost immediately. The medical facility distorted around him, walls stretching and twisting into impossible configurations. He found himself standing in Crime Alley, where his parents had been murdered years ago. But instead of Thomas and Martha Wayne lying dead on the ground, he saw Commissioner Gordon, Alfred, all the people he had failed to save over the years. Scarecrow's form loomed enormous in the hallucination, a nightmarish scarecrow figure 50 feet tall, robes billowing, burlap sacked head cocked at an unnatural angle. The scarecrow's fingers were syringes, each one dripping with toxin.
"This is what you fear most, Batman," the hallucinated scarecrow said, in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Not death, not pain, but futility. The knowledge that no matter how hard you fight, no matter how many criminals you lock away, Gotham will never be saved. Your crusade is meaningless. Your existence is pointless. You're just a man playing dress-up, pretending to make a difference in a world that doesn't care." Batman forced himself to focus, to remember that this was just a hallucination induced by the fear toxin. He had protocols for this, mental exercises designed to help him maintain his grip on reality, even under the influence of hallucinogens. He concentrated on his training, on the physical reality of his body, on the mission. The hallucination shattered like glass. Batman found himself back in the medical facility, his breathing ragged but controlled. Scarecrow had fled deeper into the building, but the threat remained. Over the next several minutes, Batman would encounter Scarecrow's fear toxin 2 more times, each exposure creating increasingly vivid and disturbing hallucinations. In one particularly memorable sequence, the game itself seemed to glitch and reset, with Batman finding himself restrained on a gurney being wheeled through Arkham by an army of Joker's thugs while the clown Prince mocked him. It was a hallucination within a hallucination designed to make Batman question his own sanity. But Batman persevered through each exposure, eventually tracking Scarecrow to an isolated section of the facility. The final confrontation was brief but intense. Batman grabbed Scarecrow before the villain could inject him with yet another dose of concentrated toxin, and Scarecrow, realizing he had underestimated Batman's resistance to his fear gas, fled through the facility toward the sewers. Batman pursued, following Scarecrow down into the catacombs beneath Arkham Asylum, the ancient network of tunnels and abandoned cells that dated back to Amadeus Arkham's time. This would prove to be a terrible mistake for Scarecrow, because these sewers were home to another of Batman's deadliest foes. Killer Croc was waiting. Waylon Jones, known to the world as Killer Croc, had been a victim of a rare genetic condition from birth. His skin had mutated into thick, scale-like armor. His teeth had grown sharp and numerous. His body had become massive and powerful, more reptilian than human. Society had rejected him, turning him into a sideshow attraction and eventually a criminal. Years of living in sewers and eating raw meat had eroded what remained of his humanity. In Arkham's flooded catacombs, Killer Croc had found his perfect hunting ground.
Scarecrow fled into the darkness, splashing through standing water, and ran directly into Croc's waiting jaws. The encounter was mercifully brief for Scarecrow. Killer Croc seized the fear specialist and dragged him under the black water. Batman heard Scarecrow's final scream echo through the tunnels, then silence. Now Batman faced a different problem. He was trapped in Killer Croc's territory with a predator who knew every inch of these flooded passages. The hunt that followed was unlike any battle Batman had faced before. This wasn't about martial arts or detective work. This was primal. Predator versus predator in the darkness. Croc would disappear beneath the water, using submerged tunnels to move silently through his domain. Batman tracked him using sonar and careful observation, watching for ripples in the water, listening for the slightest sound. Several times, Croc lunged from the water with terrifying speed, nearly catching Batman. Each time, the Dark Knight barely managed to avoid those massive jaws or deliver explosive gel to drive the creature back. The battle ranged through multiple chambers of the flooded catacombs, Batman slowly leading Croc toward a trap. Finally, in the largest chamber, Batman managed to collapse part of the ceiling on Killer Croc, stunning him long enough to apply restraints and escape back to the surface. Behind him, Croc's roars of rage echoed through the depths. Two of the Joker's guests had been dealt with, but the night was far from over. The Poison Garden. Batman's investigation into the Titan formula led him to the botanical gardens where Poison Ivy had been imprisoned in a specialized containment cell designed to prevent her from accessing plant life. The Joker had freed her with a specific purpose in mind. Ivy's unique connection to plant life, combined with her biochemistry expertise, made her the perfect person to help mass-produce the Titan formula using botanical components. When Batman arrived at the botanical gardens, he found the facility had been completely transformed. Ivy's powers had gone into overdrive, fed by the Joker's promise of freedom and revenge against humanity. Massive vines burst through concrete and steel. Giant Venus flytraps and other carnivorous plants had grown to monstrous sizes, consuming any guards or inmates unlucky enough to wander into the gardens. At the center of this botanical nightmare sat Poison Ivy on a throne of twisted roots and thorns. Her skin tinged green with chlorophyll, her red hair adorned with flowers and leaves. She had become a goddess of the plant world, drunk on her own power. "Batman," she purred as he approached through the maze of hostile vegetation. "Welcome to my garden. Finally, a world where humanity doesn't poison and destroy everything it touches. Finally, the green can flourish without interference." Ivy had lost herself completely to her plant connection. She genuinely believed she was saving the world by letting nature reclaim Arkham Island. The Joker had manipulated her perfectly, offering her freedom while secretly using her abilities to advance his own plans. The battle against Poison Ivy was less a fight and more a war of attrition. Batman couldn't directly attack Ivy while she was connected to her vast network of plant life. The plants would protect her, regenerate her injuries, even absorb damage meant for her. Instead, he had to sever her connection to that network piece by piece. Using explosive gel and carefully placed batarangs, Batman destroyed the massive roots that connected Ivy to her throne. With each severed connection, she grew weaker, more desperate, more willing to throw everything at him. The entire botanical gardens became a battlefield, with plants attacking from every direction, while Batman systematically dismantled Ivy's power base. When the final root was severed, Ivy collapsed, her enhanced form withering back to something approaching normal human proportions. Batman secured her in restraints and left her for Gordon's men to collect later. But in defeating Ivy, Batman had learned something crucial. The Titan formula was almost complete. Dr. Penelope Young had been developing it in secret, funded by Quincy Sharp and manipulated by the Joker. The formula was designed to temporarily transform anyone who injected it into a massive, incredibly strong monster, essentially creating the Joker's army of superhuman thugs. And according to the notes Batman found in the botanical gardens, the Joker had already begun mass production. The Warden's secret. Batman's investigation eventually led him back to the Arkham Mansion, the administrative building that had once been the home of Amadeus Arkham. If he wanted to understand the Joker's complete plan, he needed access to Sharp's files and research. What he found in Sharp's office was disturbing in ways he hadn't anticipated. The office was covered in writings. Not notes or administrative documents, but ravings, carved and written across every surface. Some were in Quincy Sharp's handwriting. Others appeared far older, matching the historical samples of Amadeus Arkham's writing that Batman had encountered in his research. Sharp's journals revealed the truth about the spirit of Arkham, the alternate personality that had been guiding the Warden's actions for years. They detailed Sharp's blackouts, his missing time, his growing certainty that he was possessed by Arkham's founder. And most disturbingly, they revealed that the Joker knew everything. The Joker had been blackmailing Sharp for months, using the Warden's mental illness to gain access to resources, to facilitate the transfer of his thugs from Blackgate to look the other way while preparations for tonight's takeover were made. Sharp had been a puppet, controlled by both his own fractured psyche and the Joker's manipulation. Batman found Sharp himself cowering in a hidden panic room, surrounded by Amadeus Arkham's original writings. The Warden was in the grip of his alternate personality, convinced he was channeling the asylum's founder, raving about demons and purification and the destiny of Arkham. "He's here," Sharp whispered, his eyes wide and unfocused. "The demon bat, just like Amadeus said, it's all true. The bat comes to destroy us all." Batman realized that Sharp was looking at him, that in his delusional state, the Warden believed Batman was the demonic entity that had tormented Amadeus Arkham generations ago. It was a disturbing parallel, one that made Batman question his own methods and the fear he instilled in criminals. But there was no time for philosophy. Batman secured Sharp in the panic room and moved on. The Joker was waiting. The final confrontation. All paths led back to where this nightmare had begun, the penitentiary, where the Joker had established his command center. Batman fought his way through wave after wave of armed thugs, using every tool in his arsenal, pushing his body to its limits. When he finally reached the penitentiary's main hall, he found the Joker waiting for him on a throne made of destroyed security equipment and broken furniture. Harley Quinn stood at his side, armed and dangerous, and surrounding them were dozens of unconscious guards and staff members, hostages to ensure Batman's cooperation. "There he is," the Joker announced gleefully. The guest of honor. Did you enjoy the party, Bats? I planned it all just for you. Batman approached cautiously, analyzing the situation. The Joker was holding a detonator, presumably connected to those bombs he'd claimed to have planted in Gotham. But something about the Joker's body language suggested he was weaker than usual, almost sick. I can see you figured out my little secret, the Joker said, noticing Batman's observation. Yes, I'm not feeling well. Haven't been for a while, actually. Turns out all those chemical baths and experimental toxins take a toll on a body. I'm dying, Bats. Isn't that hilarious? The Joker's laughter had a desperate edge to it now. That's what this was all about. Not just games, not just chaos. I wanted to go out with a bang. I wanted one last perfect night with you before the curtain falls. And I wanted to leave behind a legacy, an army transformed by Titan, a new generation of chaos to terrorize Gotham after I'm gone. As the Joker ranted, Batman noticed Dr. Young being held captive nearby. She was terrified but alive, and she was mouthing something to him. Titan. Penitentiary. Below. Batman understood. The Joker had been manufacturing Titan in the penitentiary's basement. A massive quantity of it, enough to transform dozens or even hundreds of people. That was the real threat. Not just the Joker's games, but the arsenal of transformation serum he'd created. But before we end this, the Joker continued, I want to show you something special. You see, I tested Titan on myself first. Quality control, you understand. And the results, well, let's just say they're spectacular. The Joker pulled out a massive syringe filled with glowing green liquid. Concentrated Titan formula. Before Batman could stop him, the clown prince of crime plunged it into his own neck and injected the entire contents. The transformation was horrific. The Joker's body convulsed and expanded, muscles growing to grotesque proportions. His skin turned dark and veined. His grin widened impossibly. Within seconds, the Joker had become a hulking monster, easily 8 feet tall and massively muscled, his purple suit torn to shreds by his expanded frame. Now this is more like it! Titan Joker roared, his voice deeper and more monstrous. Come on, Bats. Let's end this properly. No tricks, no gadgets, just you and me and our fists. The battle that followed was brutal. Batman had fought enhanced enemies before, but Titan Joker combined superhuman strength with the Joker's unpredictable fighting style. The monster would charge with incredible speed, would grab and throw massive objects, would pound the ground hard enough to create shockwaves. Batman used every advantage he could find, dodging at the last second to make Titan Joker crash into walls, using explosive gel to create environmental hazards, targeting weak points when the monster overextended himself. It was the hardest fight of Batman's career, pushing him beyond exhaustion. The battle ranged across the penitentiary, destroying walls and equipment. Harley Quinn tried to interfere, but Batman managed to subdue her early on. The Joker's thugs watched in awe and terror as their boss fought the Batman in his monstrous form. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Batman managed to exploit an opening. As Titan Joker charged, Batman dodged and applied explosive gel to the weakened floor beneath the monster's feet. The explosion sent Titan Joker crashing down into the basement level, into the very facility where the formula had been manufactured.
Batman followed him down, determined to end this once and for all. Dawn at Arkham.
In the basement, surrounded by vats of Titan formula, Batman and the transformed Joker had their final exchange. The Titan was wearing off, the Joker's body returning to its normal proportions, the transformation proving unstable and temporary.
Well, the Joker said weakly, lying in the rubble. That was fun while it lasted. Did you like my show?
Batman stood over him, exhausted, battered, but victorious. It's over, Joker.
Is it? Is it really?
The Joker grinned through bloodied teeth.
I don't think so, Bats. Tonight was just a preview. A reminder that no matter how many times you lock us up, we'll always find a way out. This place, Arkham, it's not a solution. It's a revolving door. And we're all trapped in it together. You, me, all the crazies. Round and round we go. Batman knew the Joker was right in his twisted way, but there was no other option. Justice demanded that these criminals face consequences, that they be stopped from hurting others. Even if the system was broken, Batman had to believe it could be fixed. Gordon and his officers finally reached the island as dawn broke over Gotham Bay. The bridges had been repaired enough to allow access. SWAT teams swept through Arkham's facilities, rounding up inmates, securing the remaining hostages, beginning the long process of restoring order. Batman handed the Joker over to Gordon personally, ensuring the clown prince of crime was properly restrained and monitored. The bombs in Gotham had been a bluff. Batman had suspected as much, and Oracle's remote analysis had confirmed no explosive devices matched the Joker's description. As the sun rose, casting light across Arkham Island, Batman surveyed the damage. Parts of the asylum would need to be completely rebuilt. The death toll among staff and inmates was significant. The psychological trauma inflicted on survivors would last for years, but they had survived. Batman had stopped the Joker's plan, prevented Titan from being released into Gotham, contained the chaos before it could spread beyond the island. Quincy Sharp was removed from his position and committed to psychiatric care, ironically becoming a patient in the very asylum he had once administered. His political career was over. His delusions, finally, exposed. As Batman left Arkham Island, he looked back at the Gothic fortress, silhouetted against the morning sky. He had walked through hell last night and emerged on the other side. But the Joker's words echoed in his mind. Round and round we go. The cycle would continue. The inmates would be locked up, they would break out again, and Batman would stop them again. Arkham Asylum would remain Gotham's dumping ground for the criminally insane, its walls containing humanity's darkest impulses. But for tonight, at least, the monsters were caged. Gotham was safe. Batman disappeared into the shadows, heading home to Wayne Manor, to Alfred, to whatever rest he could find before the cycle began again. Behind him, Arkham Asylum stood silent, waiting for its next descent into madness. The events of that night would have far-reaching consequences. Quincy Sharp's removal created a power vacuum, one that would eventually be filled by Hugo Strange and his sinister plans. The Joker's Titan formula would resurface in new forms, weaponized by other villains. And the fundamental question of what to do with Gotham's criminally insane remained unanswered. But those are stories for another time.
For now, Arkham Asylum stands as a testament to humanity's endless struggle against its own darkness, a Gothic monument built on cursed ground, housing the unhoused souls of those who stare too long into the abyss. And somewhere in its maximum security wing, the Joker laughs in his cell, already planning his next masterpiece. Because in Arkham, the madness never truly ends. It only waits.